You're watching Throttle House, and I'm James Engelsman.
And I'm Thomas Holland. And today we wanted to see which of the baby brothers of the Veloster N and the Honda Civic Type R is the best hatchback.
No, coupe.
What?
They're coupes.
Mine's a hatchback.
Well, from this side, but not the other side.
Fine.
Yeah.
At least they both have fake vents.
No, mine doesn't.
Those are fake vents. That's a fake vent.
Excuse me.
Mine's fake, yours is fake.
Excuse me. What's that right there?
Whatever.
Yeah. Civic wins.
Okay, so yes, both these cars have fake vents, but they still represent truly desirable prospects. Let's look at the Civic Si, shall we? A turbocharged engine under the bonnet with 205 horsepower and 192 pound-feet of torque. It stands to give the Veloster Turbo a good run for its money. And it doesn't hold back aesthetically either, with its aggressive spoiler and front grille. It also holds a little ace up its sleeve, a limited slip differential. What you got to say about that, Veloster?
The Veloster sees your LSD and raises you a real volume knob. Yes, the SI has an LSD, and maybe even the more dynamic driving experience. We'll get to that later. But the Veloster looks like it might be the more usable of the two. With everything from a heated steering wheel and spacious hatchback-like storage to a peppy 201 horsepower, 1.6-liter turbo motor, the Veloster is happy to try and win over you and your pocketbook. So before we get into it, make sure you subscribe because we've got a lot more comparisons and car reviews coming up every Wednesday.
Okay, so while Thomas is headed off in the Hyundai Veloster Turbo, I'm in the Civic Si Coupe. And I kind of like both of these cars because they represent a movement out of the Japan-Korea area of car manufacturers that don't want to get involved in these so-called horsepower wars. And as far as I'm concerned, they're crushing it. I mean, look at the Mazda Miata, recently upgraded to 181 horsepower. And it's one of the most fun cars you can buy today.
Veloster Turbo. Whee! Turbocharged, 1.6 liter. It is all you need to drive because it has all the torque in the world for a car of its size. In third gear, this car pulls genuinely very well. That's third gear, there's torque. That's me having fun.
So following that paradigm then, this not so little Civic has 205 horsepower and 192 pound-feet of torque. And I say not so little because it's the same wheelbase as the sedan version and only 1 inch shorter than the sedan version of the SI. So, I don't know, if you're not married to the aesthetic of the coupe, that's something to think about when it comes to practicality. But we'll get to practicality in a bit.
So the big news here is that Civic Si has a front limited slip differential and this Veloster does not. You can get the diff in the new Veloster N, but that's more money, and the Veloster N would not be a good match for the Civic Si. So here we are in this, which is, this car is still, without a diff, very fun to drive. The steering is quite accurate. In fact, the front end reminds me a little bit of a Mini Cooper because it has that kind of like, boom, turn-in feel that really, really makes the whole thing feel exciting all the time.
But like most cars built for fun, the one I'm in today is manual only, and the SI only comes in manual only. So it's almost as if Honda want me to look at this with an enthusiast lens. And that's what I'm gonna do. So what's this car like to drive? Well, my first 2 impressions of this car was 1, it's quick to get to speed, and 2, the steering ratio is quite short. Okay, and what I mean by that is a little bit of turn-in gives a lot of steer. And then if you couple that with the adaptive damping and the LSD and the dynamic braking, then suddenly you have a lot of confidence putting it into a corner.
And since it's a manual transmission with a really good clutch, by the way, you feel like you're kind of grabbing this car. The way that I describe driving this thing is it feels like you can pick it up and throw it like a baseball. That's just kind of how the driving experience feels. It feels light and it feels fun. It's not the most powerful, it is not the most sporty, it is not the most aggressive hatchback that I've driven, without a doubt. I mean, there's things out there like the Focus RS and the Honda Civic Type R and all that. But the Veloster Turbo has everything that you need to have fun every day, and everything you need to be comfortable.
Now, I don't think this car is as engaging to drive as a Toyota 86, but on the other hand, it's far less tiring. I got stuck in traffic for 3 hours today in this, and it was super comfortable, super compliant. The ride is like, for the road, I find it perfect. It's not too harsh. I don't find myself apologizing to passengers like I do in the BRZ. And I mention the BRZ because it's 30 grand-ish, and also a sports coupe. And I think it's impossible to look at this type of car without considering it. And you wouldn't really expect much from a 1.5 litre engine. It doesn't sound like it's going to give you anything significant. But I actually find that when I'm on the highway in 6th gear, I don't need to downshift to overtake. Unlike arguments with my girlfriend, I'm able to put my foot down, and then I watch the turbo gauge in front of me spool up to 14 psi. Before I know it, I'm 20 kilometers an hour faster, and I'm in front of the car.
Yes, so the Veloster kind of is a hatchback, but it's kind of a coupe because it kind of looks like a coupe. It's got the one big long door here, then we got a double door over there so you can actually sit in the back seat, which, by the way, there's a really weirdly large amount of leg and headroom in the back seat. For how compact and sloped this car looks on the outside, the rear area is really, really good. And the trunk actually is deep. There's a lot of room down there to put stuff in. I got more than a week's worth of groceries in the back of it without any issues whatsoever, without folding the seats down. But you could fold the seats down if you wanted. It would be hatchback-like. It's a very small but very, very practical car, which gets really good fuel economy. 6.5 liters per 100 kilometers. That's impressive. Still in my first tank of gas, and it's Friday.
What I like about this car is it's a visual fanfare from the moment you get in. There's SI on the seats, there's faux carbon fiber. When you go full throttle, it flashes red at you just before red line, so you know where to change gears, which is a nice visual aid. Do the revs overstay their welcome? Yes. But that's made up for by a very forgiving gearbox. This would be a very easy manual to learn on. That said though, there is a bit of forgiveness in places where I don't think there should be. For example, even in gear, I'm in 4th gear right now, there's quite a lot of give.
I really do actually like the way that this car goes around a corner. You kind of just toss it in. That whole baseball analogy I used a minute ago. Yeah, it feels like light on its toes. You can tell that there's an open diff when you really start to get the power down in a tight corner. It really does spin that inside wheel, and when you're pulling away from a stoplight and you stomp on it, you can feel the one wheel peel coming on for sure. The traction control takes care of it, but I got some torque steer because of that lack of diff too, because there is a substantial amount of torque actually. There's more than enough to have fun every day. Put it this way, it would be about $3 grand to put a limited slip differential in the front of this car. And I know we don't go too much into the whole tuning thing, but you could drop a software tune in this. If you put a software tune in a diff, this would be a fantastically fun little autocross car. And it's not even the N. This isn't even the Veloster N. That's a better car than this. This one is fun, as is. The chassis of the Veloster is good, period.
It also doesn't feel as assisted as a run-of-the-mill Corolla. They've removed certain features and kept some others. For example, they've kept this kind of side monitoring blind spot thing, which I don't like at all, because there's a huge delay in when it presents itself to you. So it goes black screen, then the video, and then black screen again. And sometimes I don't want to see a video screen. I want to be able to see my Apple Maps so that I know that I'm taking the so that I know that I'm taking the correct right turn, and that maybe if there's an instant left turn afterwards, I don't miss it. But because this thing takes so long to come on and then disappear, it kind of leaves you in the lurch, and I don't like that. The buttons on the steering wheel feel very cheap. There is no audio knob, which I keep looking for, even though I've had this car for a week now, and I'm stuck with this weird touch screen left thing that needs to disappear, and apparently it is disappearing, so Honda have been listening.
The torque steer and the open diff in the front makes this kind of a fun car to drive, because your steering wheel's all over the place. You're all over the place. However, the car stays very connected with the road, even on a bumpy back road like this, because the damping is fantastic. There is a fair bit of road noise, but the damping is really good. I don't know if you can see it, but I hit and I stop. And there's no hard impacts from the suspension. it just kind of deals with the bumps and keeps you planted. I have autocrossed these. I was at the launch for the Veloster, and you can get some good rotation out of the chassis. It's actually a really good little car to drive. And I think that the Veloster N obviously is going to be better and set up better, different suspension and all that stuff. But the Veloster Turbo is still a very fun little car. And if you're looking for kind of a basic platform for tuning, or if you're just looking for a daily runabout car that you could still go to the autocross course with, you're going to find it in the regular Veloster Turbo.
As far as the styling is concerned, I do like this car. I think it might age badly. I'm worried about that. But different to the sedan, we only have 2 doors, obviously, because it's a coupe. This door on my left is the biggest door I've ever seen in my life. In fact, this door is so large that when Rose fell off the Titanic, if she had had this instead of a wooden plank, Jack Dawson would still be with us today. In fact, he would have been able to fit on that thing anyway. Rose is okay, so what's it like on the inside? Well, when you're sitting in here, it actually feels quite a large cabin. You don't expect to see a coupe roof behind you, but there is. Also, looking in the rear view, you get to see your spoiler, so if you want to pretend you're kind of in a Porsche GT3 or something, you can if you have a good imagination. Also, passengers in the rear can fit here somehow. Their head's kind of awkwardly under the glass, but there's a lot of legroom and enough headroom to get by.
There are a few little quirks, and I don't know if this is just this particular car or if it's all Velosters. I don't know. Here they are. Number 1, the headliner and sunroof creaks. I've tried to stop it, I've tried to move it, I put it in different positions. It creaks and it cracks when it gets cold. And I don't know if that's going to be indicative of all Velosters coming up in the future or high mileage or whatever it is, but I can tell you this one has 9,000 kilometers on it and it's creaking. Do with that information what you will. Also, the seat does the weirdest little thing, okay? It's height adjustable, which is great. I can actually find a really good driving position. I've got all the knee room that I could ever want. I've got space to heel toe, not smashing my knee on the steering column at all, and the steering wheel telescope, so I'm in a really good spot. However, every time I get out of the car and then get back in the car, the seat has raised magically. I don't know why. I don't know if it can't be on purpose. There must be something malfunctioning in the seat, which obviously is not the fault of all Velosters, but this particular one is doing that. All I know is that it's a phantom seat as far as I can tell, because every time I get back in my Veloster, I smash my knee on the column and I have to put my seat down again because it has come up. That's irritating.
One, it seems like it's not important to mention anymore because it's becoming such a frequent thing. The Apple CarPlay and Android Auto is not standard across so many vehicles still. In fact, the Mazda range is only just starting to put it in now, and if you have one, you can start retrofitting it. But this has it. And I really enjoy it because it means I'm not sitting in there's no temptation to fiddle with my phone. And I still see a lot of people fiddling with their phones while driving, and it drives me nuts. And I think it's very unsafe. So this having Apple CarPlay and Android Auto technically saves lives. You could even say, on some level, that it's doing its civic duty. I'm sorry.
I really like the Veloster interior, actually. Everything is super, just exactly where you want it to be. Out of the way things, materials not very good on the door. The door itself looks completely cheap. There are quite a lot of hard plastics kicking around here. Once you can get over those and you realize how much the car costs, and you can't fault it for that, the rest of it is bang on. There's little red accents everywhere around the dials, on the dashboard, near the climate control, on the shift knob, on the steering wheel, that kind of catch your eye from the peripherals and make it feel like a little bit special, a little bit more than just a regular Hyundai. Now, the actual infotainment in the center console here is bang on right. It's perfect. You don't hear me say that very often in a car. This is perfect. I love it. Volume knob, tuning knob, hard buttons to use my touchscreen, infotainment very intuitive, you've heard me talk about that before, and the climate control is easy to use. I've got an auxiliary input, 2 charging inputs, and a 180 watt 12 volt plug there. Down here I've got a sport button, which if I put it in sport, by the way, it sharpens up the throttle, makes it even more peppy, which there it goes, whee, calm down. And we've got a heated seat, heated steering wheel, and the traction control button is down here. I also have a heads up display in this model. So you see, I've got everything that I need, and it is all in a really good spot. it's kind of hard to find any fault with the interior of this car.
It's hard to properly criticize an interior when the price is sub 30 grand and it gives you the feeling of performance that this car gives you. And I say feeling of performance because I have to imagine that this car deviates somewhat from the legacy Civic SIs of old with the VTEC engines. It just doesn't have the engine sound, and the audio fanfare doesn't match the level of visual occasion that this car brings. The engine is not inspiring sounding. It feels good and it's got speed, but I don't know, I feel like a lot of Civic Si owners tend to go aftermarket with this stuff anyway.
Let's go drive the Civic Si because that might have it in the dynamics department, and that's very important to me. So I'm gonna go find James. I guarantee you he's lost.
There are other gripes I have with the interior. The shift knob, for one, is very sensitive to the temperature outside and the sunlight. Another gripe I have is that this cotton material on the side and on the center console is very cheap. It kind of feels like Halloween costume cheap. It's also very scratchy, so this car would be absolutely perfect for you if you had chronic mosquito bites on both elbows, because you just spend the whole day going, what? Yeah, because it would feel so good. But all in all, a punchy, well-adjusted, comfortable car that leaves a little bit to be desired in the engaging category. So I'm looking forward to seeing what the Veloster's like.
Ready to switch? This door is massive.
It's huge.
What? It's like
huge.
We're on a hill and it's like opening the door to a safe.
I know, I wasn't going to invite my parents for dinner, but now I can, because we're going to sit around the door and eat. Yeah.
It is, the Veloster's big too, but at least there's only one big door because I've got the half door thing. That's pretty cool. Can I drive this now?
You can.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to driving that.
Let's do.
Oh my god. Okay, so like the Honda, there is also a bit of fanfare in here. It's kind of exciting. There's red lines everywhere. Red line here, red line on the steering wheel, red line on the seats. It very proudly says turbo on the seats, just like the SI and the Civic. But does it move like the Civic? Losing traction. See, it doesn't have that LSD. It also suffers from rev hang, actually. I believe the specs we're driving of these cars, they're $9 apart. So they should both be subject to the same scrutiny. And given that this is also the enthusiast version of the base car, we shall scrutinize.
All right, in the Civic Si, sport mode on. This feels faster than the Veloster. Yep, it does. It feels faster, not by much, but it definitely feels faster. Throttle response is a little bit better, engine response is a little bit better, everything's just a little bit sharper, including the steering, without a doubt. Yeah, I think the steering in this is better. The steering ratio is obviously faster. And you chuck it into a corner like so, yeah, and you can feel that diff working up front. You can feel it pulling the car through the corner. I really do like driving the Civic Si. I forgot actually how much I like driving the Civic Si.
Both cars' turbos kind of kick in about the 3,000 RPM mark, which wouldn't be an issue if it weren't for the fact that they both redline at about 6,500. And I feel like, especially with the Civic, you're only starting to get into it before you have to change gear. And I think the Civic does a sub 7-second 0 to 60, so make of that what you will. They both feel pretty quick, but I want to say that the Civic takes it on that one.
Yeah, the turn-in feels more crisp. I don't like the steering wheel as much though. It feels meatier, but I don't like the shape of it. And I also don't really as much like the driving position. I have just as much knee room, and the steering wheel's coming at me as much, but I can't seem to really feel as at home in it, if that makes any sense. I don't really know why. Oh, I don't like the clutch though. Or the shifter, for that matter. This shifter, so people have said in the past that I'm stupid because I think that the SI shifter is no good, and I stand by that. I do not like the shift selector in the Civic Si. I feel that it feels hollow and cheap to me. I can't deny it's very notchy, it slots into gear very positively, but there's something about it that I just don't like.
One thing I will say is that I do already like the size over the Civic. This feels smaller, feels a bit more nimble, so I do enjoy that part of it. I feel like I can place it on the road just as easily, although the previous generation kind of failed us in living up to a name that sounds that cool. It has that kind of speedster, like that stir, you know, and the previous generation lacked that stir. And I think this doesn't. I'm very curious to try the Veloster N, because I would love to drive a slightly more aggressive version of this. But I think as far as styling is concerned, I'm a big fan of the interior, especially at the price range. Having recently got out of things like the Hyundai Kona, the Mazda CX-3, I think this is more of an occasion and more fun. I think I like the look of the Civic shift knob better, but it loses because it brands your hand on a hot day, and I don't need to be initiated into a fraternity every time I want to change gear.
So, as far as I'm concerned, I don't know what James is saying in the Veloster right now. I think that the Civic Si dynamically is a more exciting car to drive. See, like this, toss it in. Oh yeah, it's fun. Wonderful little car to drive. However, the Veloster has the Civic Si in almost every single other possible measurable respect when it comes to the interior, comfort, practicality, usability, all that stuff.
So, in the end, we both decided which one we would each have. James very narrowly chose the Veloster for its ease of use interior and fun personality. And I, after much deliberation, decided I would forego a bit of practicality and take the SI because of its sharper steering and more engaging front end. Whichever of these you choose, you won't be disappointed, but tell us which one you would buy in the comments and subscribe for more Throttle House.